That's how they did it. Now, they hire them, this is just random friend. So, they're not hired. There is no like. I worked for a couple of years back. This is some work 20 years ago. I like to work with yeah, I really enjoy it. God wants to understand stuff. We say hello. He said, I don't know. We talked about it already. We said that. Sure. It's just no other way. You can tell they're like, Yeah. Is this up? Or no, it was oh, that. I want y'all to cry. With the whole country's taking off. Because
I apologize. I forgot to bring the flyers so I can sign them. Let your teachers know that you were here if they're not already. Do they take attendance outside? Depends on your why you're there. Okay, but I know the freshmen have to be here, correct? Okay. Simone Barrett. I am a researcher for the Robert M. Bell Center. Most people have never heard of that. Don't know where it is. Have you ever heard of it? Is it on campus? I think so. Yes. Oh, let me start talk over here for us to start. Oh, okay. Yes. Robert M. Bell was a judge, circuit judge, and then became a chief judge of the state of Maryland. Does anybody know where he went to school? He went to school here. I work in the center where we have a center on the fourth floor that's named after him. Does anybody know why the center is named after him? No looking at your computer, but does anybody know? No, there were other circuit judges. There was other circuit judges. Okay. He was a high school student, and I can't remember what restaurant they were at, but it was in the late 50s, early 60s. And he was a high school student, went to Dunbar High School in Baltimore, Maryland, and he got arrested. A lot of Morgan students got arrested that day, and other students that we recruited. Does anybody know how a warrant works? If there's several people on the warrant? Excuse me? They get detained, but how does the warrant read? Does anybody know how the warrant reads alphabetically? Okay, so if it's more people that's being charged, say if your last name was Ash, her last name was Zebra, I don't know. And so you would be listed first, and Zebra would be listed last. Everybody else would be listed in between. And at 16 years old, he became did they convict him? A convicted felon of loitering. They called it loitering at the time. Okay. Does anybody know what was over at the shopping center before it got all glammed up? No, it was another shopping center that was put up there in the early 50s, about 55, 56. It was a movie theater there. Very good. It was a movie theater there. And what about the movie theater was so, I don't know, so exact? Or what about the movie theater was they wouldn't let black people in, and it was segregated? But what about that particular place in that particular shopping center made it so spectacular? I'll put it that way. So wait a minute, let me ask a question of you guys. You've never read the the banners that's out in the student center. You walk by them probably every day. You've read them? Okay. So it was the movie theater. That was the last thing to get desegregated. The students just started coming. They started arresting them. They started getting a bail, $600. A lot of students couldn't afford $600. I don't even think the tuition here was $600 because my mother was a student at the time. Yeah, tuition. Yeah, it wasn't. It might have been $50 or something like that. Yeah, but a lot of people couldn't afford that. A lot of people, if you had 10 children or 5 children back in the late 50s or whatever, you couldn't afford to send them to college. All right. So let me give you some dates here. Because does anybody know why this school is named Morgan? What was the reverend's name? Littleton Morgan. Right. He was the first Biblical Institute. It was called Biblical Institute at the time, and he was the first chairman of the board. Okay. Um, Centenary Biblical Institute for the first 2 years had maybe 4 or 5 students. Some of them were white, some of them were black. Most of them became Methodist preachers after that. It became Morgan College in 1867. Okay, they were at the Sharp Street Church, and it wasn't enough room, so they were looking for a place to expand. So that was 1867. They named the school Morgan. Okay, even though they were having classes before, but they named the school Morgan. Um, and it was just Morgan College, not Morgan State, but Morgan College. In 1915, Andrew Carnegie gave us money for a building. Does anybody know where the building is? Yes, it's still here. It's still here. I don't think many renovations have been done, but it's still here. 1939, we had John Goucher Women's College at the time, as president. So not president, but president of the board. So what he did was he changed it to Morgan State, or had them change it to Morgan State College, because he wanted to start opening up Goucher College, which was the all women's college. So not only did they change it to Morgan State, they let women in for the first time, because they didn't want, we're going through this hassle back and forth with this black college. So we definitely don't want to go back and forth with the black women. Okay. Does anybody know when it became Morgan State? What year? Y'all weren't born. 1975. What did I say? Morgan State was 1939. Morgan University, right, was 1975. You're correct. Um, does anybody know any known black people that came and spoke at Morgan State? Not like for commencement, but a fraternity. The Qs invited this gentleman to come. Carl, you know your stuff. And who was Malcolm X debating? He was debating a gentleman by the name, well, a professor by the name of August Meyer. August Meyer was a history professor. Um, He went to a college where they couldn't mingle with the black people. They couldn't, you know, share the dorm. So he and his brother just shared the dorm with the black people. They didn't even go with the white people. He wrote several books. A white scholar in a Negro at a Negro college or something like that, and he explained what was going on here at the college. Not only at the college, because you have to remember, at the time this was all white, so they had a college in the midst of a white community. They couldn't walk down the front of the house after dark. They had to walk down the alleys. They couldn't shop at the Northwood Shopping Center, which we have now. They couldn't shop. They couldn't eat. They couldn't do anything. Okay. Does anybody know the first time a black college was founded and what that college was? It's South. Fisk. It was Fisk. Yep, that's what my notes say, and my research said the first. And not only they got rid of their white um, president at the time, Mackenzie Phillips, Fayette McKenzie, and they got rid of him in 1924 because the Jubilee singers would go around and sing, and a lot of times they would have to sit in the back until their performance was up, and a lot of time it was for white people and things like that. When they had 1922 or 1923 a commencement, Mackenzie Phillips wouldn't let the professors sit with um, the people that were in charge of, or the, what would we call them? The, God, why can't I think of it? Well, anyway, these were the men that the chairman of the boards. This was the board members, and they got to sit before the students that were graduating could sit, or any of the professors, could sit, and that's because of the white president at the black college. Okay, so after that, they got rid of them. Yeah, the board members got together, the people in the community got together, and they got rid of them. All right. Does anybody know who other than Morgan State students protested Baltimore? Well, Howard did, but also a big. It's not a university. Excuse me. It's not a university. It's a black institution that has helped black people for over 100 years. Thank you. NAACP. Okay, why y'all not answering? Y'all hear these two over here answering. Why y'all not answering? Okay, and it was. And because Morgan students were so involved, they started a youth chapter and a college chapter because of the work that they did in Baltimore and the NAACP. And wait a minute, Lily Carroll Jackson and Juanita Jackson Mitchell, mother and daughter, were, well, number one, Juanita Jackson was the first black woman to ever go to the University of Maryland Law School and graduate. Okay, so she was very, very intelligent. And I hope I don't em- embarrass or make somebody feel bad by saying also they were very light. And light people, I mean, no, I mean light, like, you would have to see them with other black people to know that they were black. Well, so what did you think? You thought they were more than a little white? Have you seen pictures of them? Have you been to their museum? So, right, but you've never gone to Lily Carroll Jackson's home, which is now a museum run by Morgan State. No, it's 1320 Utah Place. And that's a place where, and it's owned by Morgan and Dr. Barnes, Iris Barnes. She is the chair of the, or the, yeah, chair of the museum, and she's there just about every day, or if there's someone there, or you can call and find out their hours, or go online and find out their hours. Okay. And Morgan had a group called SAG, students for something. Well, anyway, it got back to the president, President Jenkins, and he was like, "You can't do that. We get funds from the state," and they were trying to take the funds from them. So they changed their name to Civic Interest Group. So they really didn't have any ties to Morgan, but they would go places and they would protest downtown. They always talk about this. They went to a place called Hochul Cones. Most places downtown had a lunch counter or a sandwich counter where you could go and eat. So of course, Morgan students one Saturday gonna put on their finest Sunday best, got on the bus, went downtown, went to Hochul Cones, and the lady reached over and said, "What can I serve you?" So they were like shocked. All of a sudden, this place has been segregated for so long. Now they're going to serve us. And nobody had money. I think somebody had $2 and it was like 20 students or something like that. So they got a piece of pie and a glass of water, and that was enough to not only desegregate, but they had enough money to get home on the bus, and they didn't have to walk. Okay, and this is part of my dissertation, and the theme of my dissertation was to look at protests throughout Morgan protests throughout the decades, because they had one in the 20s, the 30s, 40s, the theater. They couldn't go to Ford's Theater, so they protested that with the NAACP. Had one in the 50s around here, one in the 60s, still around here. Not too much in the 70s. In the 90s, a gentleman by the name of Travis Mitchell, he is something with the MPT television station here in Maryland, in Owings Mills. He and some of his friends that were protesting, they walked from campus to Annapolis to the State House overnight. Yeah, they got there safely and they got home safely, but just the energy, the way they wanted to protest, to have that type of thinking, we're going to walk. We're going to walk. We're going to show them how much we really want this. Right? We need new computers. We need new desks. We need new chairs in the auditoriums. We need everything. We need good food to eat. So they did come in and they did do some changes to the campus, and it looked nice for a while. And when I got here in 2000, they were talking about on campus. They were talking about some type of lawsuit that the 4 Black colleges were doing against the state. That was in 2000. It went to federal court. Well, it went to local court, then it went to federal court. Then they said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. So that's when we had Governor Hogan. So they didn't. They just put it on hold. And in the next election, we got a Black governor and a Black. I guess she was the head of the Chamber of Commerce or whatever for the council in Annapolis. And they had a gentleman come and speak and tell them why they should give this money, and he didn't want to have to sue them again. Anybody have an idea who that person was? Because they didn't have to sue again. And he spoke not too long after that, after speaking to the people in Annapolis. He spoke, and then he came and did commencement for us. Does anybody know who that was? Benjamin. He was a Q. Benjamin Crump. Oh my God! When those two white men shot that black kid down in somewhere in Georgia. Benjamin, look it up. Definitely look up Benjamin Crump. Yeah, you recognize the face of, yeah. Okay, and what I tried to do with my work and my dissertation is to analyze the unique impact of not only feminists but the evolution of student activists. Nobody wants to believe that, well, we don't on campus don't want to believe that North Carolina A&T, those three gentlemen from North Carolina A&T, desegregated the Woolsworth in Fayetteville, North Carolina. No, we had desegregated all the Rite Aids up here like in 55. But we never got any type of statues or anything like that. What Morgan students did not do is when they went down south and tried to and protested down south, Morgan students didn't do that. They said they had enough on campus and around Maryland to do that. So they went to the Eastern Shore. Gloria Richardson, she just died a year ago. I know y'all have heard of Gloria Richardson. Okay. She was, for a black person, she had graduated Howard. Her family owned their own store. At one time, everybody would go to the store. After that, just once she graduated and got involved with the civil rights, CNAC is what it was called, Cambridge CNAC. Okay, that's what it was called. And once they saw her family being involved, they stopped dealing with her family. But they had enough black people who worked and shopped at that store, because the NAACP had a saying at that time: don't buy where you can't shop, or don't shop where you can't buy. It was, they did it both ways. So what it's telling you, if you can go in the store and you can get a dress, but you can't try it on, but I can put my money down and buy the dress and hope that it fits. Or I have a white person that can bring it back, because I can't bring it back. It's been on my black body. God forbid. I mean, these are things that they went through. And while I was doing this research, my mother was still alive. So I would ask her a lot of questions. Why didn't you protest? Why didn't you do this? She said, because when I got back to my neighborhood, and she lived up on Caroline and Eagle Street, or Caroline Street, Caroline and Biddle. She said, when I got back home, everything I needed was in the community. The doctor, if you needed an attorney was there. Your food market. You would go down to Bel Air Market on Gay Street, and they would have fresh food. My mother said she always took a Saturday class because she hated going to the market. Because back then, if you wanted a chicken, you could go to the chicken coop and say, yeah, I want that chicken right there. Then you go do your other shopping. And when you come back, they have cut and maimed. They left the innards for you, but they have chopped and defeathered the the chicken like that. But that was the only market. Number one, it was in their neighborhood, and black people could go. All right. Let's see how you read all of that. Anybody have any questions? Questions. What's your question? Because you have a question. You look like you have a question. Okay. All right. Morgan was founded 30. Oh, and Morgan had an early chapter of the NAACP. When they started the college chapters in 1930, 1940, 39 to 40, we had a president by the name of John E. Lake. They had a college questionnaire. Um, and the chapter's local project was to picket stores during, here it is, during the Buy Where You Can Work campaign. Okay, these activities beyond campus, including supporting anti lynching bills of 1936, did not go through. Did not go through. Right, these bills lack the support of the Southern Democrat leadership in Congress and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and it resulted in a defeat. Okay. Okay, here's the ones about Lily Carroll Jackson. Two of them, Morgan students were involved in several protests during the 1940s. Two of them involved collaborations with Baltimore City branch of the NAACP, while others were student-based initiatives. The first protest was a march on the State House in 1942. Lily Carroll Jackson, the president of the Baltimore City branch of the NAACP, Juanita Mitchell Jackson, Lily's daughter, and the chapter's legal counsel, branch members, and Morgan students converged on the promenade. At the march, the Morgan student Harry Cole was another member of the Maryland judicial system that sat on the board of regents for Morgan State. Made a passionate appeal to the Governor Herbert R. O'Connor, and requested that they be pleased to bring justice and fair treatment to Baltimore be heard. So when we fight abroad, we can feel we have something to fight for. And that's another thing that the students were against. Yes.
Were there any like challenges Morgan State students had to face and riskingly while they're in the protests?
Not so much, because they were done at night, and they were done so many, it was so many of them. And in the early days they were done basically on by campus. Because like I said, you got to remember, this area was completely white. When they looked at this area to possibly buy, they had to come at night. So they had to come at night to survey the area so none of the white residents would see them, because they had been turned down several times. They looked at one in Roland Park, an area in Roland Park, and they got turned down. Um,
So they had to like come at night just because they're black?
you got to remember, honey, this was like the 1940s. Yes, you couldn't do things just because you're black. There were things you could not do just because you're black. You couldn't go to a movie. You and your girlfriend, you and your wife couldn't go to a movie. You and your child couldn't go to a movie if it was in a white area. Or, like they did down south, if you went, and a lot of places didn't have air conditioning down south, you sat up in the balcony. Yeah, yeah. What's your major, son?
I am a theater major in a screenwriting.
In a what minor?
Screenwriting.
Screenwriter. I would suggest that you do some research on Jim Crow laws, especially in the state of Maryland, and maybe you can write a screenplay about it.
If I did, it would take decades to get it right without doing right. But if I was to like write a script on the Jim Crow laws, I'd to like give specific details. It's like I don't want to like do it the wrong way, like the other historical movies that we usually see every day. I'm
Right.
just saying, I don't want to like tell the story in the wrong direction or the wrong way.
You won't. Trust me. Once you start to write, and that's how I felt. The first chapter, you always write your first chapter last because you'll know what you've written. So your introductory chapter, you write last. So I didn't write an introductory chapter. I just went into the second chapter, and it was on Morgan's founding and things like that. And I had done some research. As a graduate student, you get to go and do an internship. And one of the churches that Goucher was and Morgan was, Littleton Morgan was a church that's still here, and it's called Lovely Lane Methodist Church. It's still in Baltimore, and it's still down on 21st and Charles, but it's still down in upper Charles Village, and you can find all the research you want, all the research. I'm trying to think, was it some here? Maybe it may be some here as well. And then look at other people's dissertations. You can refer your dissertation or your work to other people's work. So say if you wanted to talk about some about my work in your work, you just note me. That's all. You just note me in your footnotes.
Still, some backfire. It's like writing a biographical film, and some biographical films bombed real bad, it takes a decade to like do specific research like on a biopic on a specific topic, or simple person, a leader, or activist, musician, or whatsoever.
Okay, now the problem we have with now we do have some activists from the 90s and from the early 2000s. They're still with us. So you could definitely, you know, talk to them, interview them. One is Travis Mitchell, like I said. He works for MPT. And Sinead, I'm not sure where Sinead works, but I could get in touch with Sinead. Okay. And they can, you know, maybe help you, kind of guide you the way. Because I didn't know what I was going to write my dissertation on. And it was Black History Month. And they were doing spots on the radio. And my chairperson said, come with me and do a spot on the radio. And she said, do you know what you're going to do? I said, my dissertation on. And I said, I was thinking about doing it on Morgan's protest years. And she looked at me and she gave me this envelope and she said, I've gotten chills every time I read this. And that's how I got my dissertation. And I built the words around the thought process. Right. What am I going to discuss? What am I not going to discuss? You know, I got to the end and I thought it was at the end. And he said, you've included no women. So I had to go back and include a chapter, which I should have done on Black women at Morgan's campus that were involved in the protest. They had, when the women got arrested, like you have Dr. Banks. Dr. Banks is your what? President of Student Affairs. They had two. They called them deans at Student Affairs. They had one for women and one for men. When the women did the protest and all went to jail, Dr. Bando went to their teachers and got homework. Right, and got homework and told the people at the jail, you're going to let me in one way. You're going to let me in to do this work, to give my students this work, or you're going to arrest me and I'm going to be in here with them anyway. So they let her in. They let her in. And it's a picture out there, I believe, where you see a Black and a white girl reading, because we weren't the only ones that were involved. Goucher students came over to help out because it's a It was a Christian school at the time. John Goucher kind of founded this. He knew that we deserved this, we needed this. So a lot of the Goucher women went to jail with us. A lot of Coppin people went to jail with us.
And other HBCU students went to jail.
Yeah, definitely other HBCU students across the country went to jail. Across the country. But I wanted to focus on Maryland, Baltimore, especially Maryland, like the Eastern Shore, because no one would believe that, it was such, well, number one, the bridge wasn't there at the time either. So they had to ferry across, right? They had to ferry across the mainland to deep Eastern Shore. So they had no way to get out once they got in if the ferry didn't come. So you had to have people set up that you could stay with or whatever. And I was told that some of the Black people were upset because they felt that their white people down there treated them fine. There was no reason for them to be protesting and doing whatever. They had Gloria Richardson's store to go to. They didn't have a black a white person's store to go to. They could go to her store. And one white child down there joined the protest. Mr. Feynman, Mr. Feynman. And they came out and they protested or hazed him first. They called his father. His father and mother came down to where they were protesting and told him if he didn't come home and never involved himself with this group again, he would not go to Crownsville. Crownsville was a state hospital for mental patients. They were going to put him in a mental institution because he was assisting the Black people at the Black colleges, because there's a Black college on Eastern Shore, Maryland, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. So they were involved, especially when they went on the Eastern Shore. They were involved. The old president, before President Wilson, he went to the University at Eastern Shore, and he got involved with some of the protests down on the Eastern Shore. Okay, still no questions? Okay. Oh, now this is just kind of crazy to me. How much the state lacked facilities for this institution. 1947, students marched to Annapolis again and asked for a gym. Who told them they couldn't have a gym? Governor Preston Lane told them, met with the four students and expressed, listened to the four students express why they feel they needed a gym. They needed a gym because they had 1,500 students taking physical education and no gym. So that's when we got Hurt Gym. Well, maybe a couple years later, we got Hurt Gym. Guess when Hurt Gym is being renovated? Yeah, last year. This thing was built, say, around 1942. It was renovated last year. Well, when I wrote it, it had been 70 years, and I wrote this in 2017. It had been 70 years since any renovations had been done to Hurt Gym. So these renovations that they've done and went in and did a massive renovation instead of building a massive gym, yeah. I can see some of the funds that the state did provide us, where it's going, because like I said, we did sue the state off for Black HBCUs, and because of Mr. Crump, we got money, and it had to be split up between the four HBCUs. But I can see differences. Chairs in the library, the little booths in the library where you could be personal or whatever. Um, I just see difference. We have what's the Magic Johnson's food now. even though it's still expensive. But we have Magic Johnson's food now. What else have I seen? Just, they're doing something to the parking lots. So you can't park in the parking lot I used to park in. I have to park in the student parking lot. But I'm willing to see what has happened. I first came to this school in 1976. I ain't gonna say when I finished, but I came to school in 1976 and I came back in 1980. So it's almost 25 years. No, did I say 1980? 2000, I'm sorry, 2000. So it's been almost 25 years. It'll be 25 years in August that I've been back, and I've earned 3 degrees since that time. I am a generational, they call us generational children, because my mom, she graduated in 56. I graduated in 2006. And my son graduated in 16 and 19. So we have 3 generations that have come to Morgan. Yeah. Any other questions? Come on now. Yes. What do you have? Yes. Yes.
Is there an ongoing lawsuit with the state about the HBCUs and their admission rate?
No, we got the money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got the money. Yeah, that's when, like I said, that's when Benjamin Crump came up and kind of talked to the state like, y'all don't want me, and that's when they gave up the money. Yeah, and plus Governor Hogan had been xed out. That was the governor before we had Westmore. Does anybody know why Westmore is important to the state of Maryland? First black governor. Got it. Okay. Okay, we talked about that. Oh, Dr. Jenkins. He had 6 more years of tenure when he retired. When did he retire? Ooh. Okay, he retired before he needed to retire. Okay, and my mother, when she was a student, she would work here, work in the registrar's office in the summertime and in the president's office during the semester. So she used to help them give papers or make papers for the graduating students to go other places. Well, go to graduate school. So, which graduate school did you think they tried to go to? It was only one place that had a graduate school in 1946. So, what did y'all think they went to? They tried to go to in the state of Maryland. Yes. No, because that wasn't a state school. Oh, so they tried to go to a state school because it's easier to transfer. That wasn't it wasn't state. No, Bowie has always been state. Bowie really was a public school in Baltimore before it became a college. University of Maryland. University of Maryland. Because they had to sue the first person. I think he was a graduate student. He wanted they made him sit outside the door when class was going on. He could sit, but he had to sit outside the door and take his notes or whatever. Oh, he got sued. The University of Maryland got sued. Lily Juanita Jackson, she sued. That was the first black female lawyer in the state of Maryland. She sued and he got in. Okay. When I used to talk to my mother about these things, she said they talked about tuition assistance program, which provided financial aid to black students who applied for admission or registered for graduate courses at the University of Maryland College Park. The state of Maryland paid a significant portion of graduate tuition for black students to attend school at institutions such as the University, I mean, not the New York University, Columbia University, UCLA. They sent them all that way just so they wouldn't go to the University of Maryland. So, what do you think Dr. Jenkins did after that? What would you do? If you know you had some elite students that were applying to an elite school, but just because you were black, your students were black, you're sending the elite students, not just some, you know, old Tommy student, but an elite student with, close to a 4.0, if not a 4.0, and they wouldn't let them in. And you're with the state, you're part of the state system. So what did you think he did? No, he did something even worse than sued. Yes. No, he didn't start his own school, but he told them bye bye. He told them bye bye. He could, and they would say that was 6 years before he could even retire. Well, had tenure, but he was like, "That's it." All right. According to my mother, the state of Maryland did anything to keep University of Maryland College Park white. My mother, she was a not a secretary. Well, I guess you could say a secretary with the federal government, a place called Holabird. And someone told her there was a teacher position at Patterson High School, which wasn't far. Then that would give us time with us in the summertime because she would be off in the summertime. You know, Daddy had to work 2 jobs in the summertime, but that was okay. Um, and she became the second African American teacher at this school called Patterson. And they brought no, they told her to pack up her books. She was going to get new books. And when she packed up her books and took them to the mailroom or had somebody take them to the mailroom, she noticed that they said, go to, I can't remember the because all the schools had a number. I couldn't remember the number to Dunbar, but she knew the number to Dunbar. And she came home one day and she was really upset. And I said, what's wrong? She said, these books that these white students aren't good enough to read or use, but they're going to send them down to Dunbar. That's where she graduated from. She said, do they know the amount of people that have gone on to, better places because they went to Dunbar, because they only had black teachers who, you know, only had black students, so they had to nurture them more. They know they had to nurture them more. But for her to see them giving them inferior books and they had to do the nurturing, she said she just couldn't take it. But she didn't resign her job, but she just thought that was horrible that the school system would do something like that. Oh, and she had maybe four students that were black when mostly were white, and they lived in our neighborhood. They would come over every morning. My mother would come down the steps. She would hug us and kiss us, or my father would come down the steps, hug us and kiss us, and send us off to school. And she would drive those kids to school because they had to catch like 3 or 4 buses. Now in the evening, it was easier than for them to get home, but it was just the discrimination all the way around. Just all the way around. Why would you do this to black students and let white students get off easy? Okay. The- exactly.
Like for black kids, we called meetings, we treated them fairly, and etc. Racism,
But is it still going on? Is it still going on?
I know, and that's why I've seen racism besides the internet all around the world, and it's really to scroll to be honest.
Right. So, what do you think we need to do about this? I mean, it looks like Morgan is pretty much set, So, what do we do if we were to go to Towson? A lot of black kids go to Towson, but they're surrounded by white environments. Would you go? Would you just go and be with the black coalition of the, campus? Or would you go and just try to mingle with everybody?
Wisely, I try to mingle
But, right.
not
That,
let the emotions race best
right.
because we all know how how racism is intense and makes us like lose our cool, but sometimes we gotta like push ourselves, like grow a heart and continue to like move on as ourselves as human. Even if it takes a lot of time to do.
Right. And I can say that my grandfather and grandmother were two different people. Okay. My grandmother, did she have I want to say she had a fear of white people, but she didn't have an affinity for white people. They know they wanted to send their two daughters, my mother and my aunt, to black colleges. And I believe that was because my grandfather, my great grandfather, well, his father was freed at an early age. Well, not an early age, but maybe his mother and father, or his father was freed at an early age. When I say an early age, early 20s or whatever. So he still could go out. So that meant all of his grandchildren, all of his children were freed. And so they had a rough time down in Isles of Wight, Virginia, Smithfield. My and I hate to say this because my grandfather never went anywhere without a gun, especially not down there. I can remember he and my Uncle Leon going down there. We had more guns in the car than we had luggage. He never slept without a gun under his pillow. Even though he was freed and he knew he could do better for his daughters, he didn't want his granddaughters to be afraid or whatever. Oh, that's why he did it. I mean, I think not only did he protect his family, he was one of 15. So they had to do it to eat. Right. They lived on a peanut farm. You can't eat peanuts all day. Right. Even though the land was there, you can't eat peanuts all day. Right. So they used to go out and hunt for squirrel, and they never brought home deer. But even when my grandfather came up here, he would go and hunt squirrel and things like that. So they always had a mind, even though he was not educated, but he always had a mind that he wanted his daughters to do better. And in some form of fashion, all of your parents want you to do better, as better than them, or at least as good as them, but really better than them. Okay. Okay, we talked about the segregated lunch counters at Reed's drugstore. Um, changed their policies during 55. And there was the ice cream parlor. Anybody remember Arundel's? Really? You remember Arundel's ice cream? Well, they dropped their policy as well in 1959. So they were way before down south. The problem they had with was on the shore, and that's why they didn't go down south. Is that my phone? All right. Okay, I want to talk to you about CIG, SIG. It was the main direct action organization active in Baltimore during the protest years of 1955 and 1964. They were led by students from Morgan State. The membership included students from Coppin, Goucher, Johns Hopkins. So John Hopkins was involved. Uh, and SIG was a SNCC affiliate. Okay, we didn't want to have SNCC be on campus, so we had an affiliate. You know, they could tell us where they're going, we could tell them what to do or whatever, but they couldn't give us direct directions. But they could say, now, if you go here, you be safe. If you go there, be safe. Don't go to this place and be safe. But they couldn't tell SIG, today you need to protest this. Tomorrow you need to protest that. It was up to the students and the other members of SIG where they would protest. Okay. And as I said, Morgan students did not participate in civil rights activities such as Freedom Rides to the South. Instead, SIG, along with NAG, students from the Maryland State College, which is the University of Maryland College, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and white students from northern cities such as the Northern Student Movement assisted the core chapter in the Freedom Rides. Okay, so we had more to do in Baltimore and in Maryland, especially on the Eastern Shore, than they have now. And you know, I'm on a lynching commission, and had something in Cambridge. And one of the gentlemen came and he says he's on a historical, I don't know, commission or whatever. And he says it's two black people. How you have two black people on a civil rights or historical commission where blacks were treated better in that part of the state than they were probably in any other part of the state? And you don't I don't understand. So that's why we stayed here on the campus, near the campus. You know, there was no need to travel 12 to 14 miles to the deep south when we had our own problems. Okay. Mm. And then, like I said, during the 90s, they had something that was led by Travis Mitchell, and they came in and they protested. He became very good friends with Dr. Richardson. Um, when he came back on campus one day, he knocked on the door. And I said, Travis Mitchell. He said, excuse me, do I know you? And I said, no, I'm writing my dissertation, but I know you, you know. And it felt good for him to know that somebody else was reading the information that he left. Okay. And then in 2017, we had a student organization led by, it was called Ex Assembly, and it was led by, oh God, why can't I think of this? I can't think of his name now. Sinead. Um, I don't know where Sinead works, but he really got involved when they shot Trayvon Martin, and the people were riding over in West Baltimore. And right. See, that's history now. That's history. That was 5 years ago, believe it or not.
How can we all forget about the travesty of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin? It still hurts to the heart, similar to the killing and production of 14-year-old Emmett Till in Mississippi.
See, that was at the end because
After seeing the movie Till, that proves the point. The movie Till also symbols the story of Emmett Till and his murder, and how his mother into Mobley got justice for himself.
And she never did. That lady that lied on that boy, I think she just recently died or is still alive. But yeah.
She's gone.
Oh, she is gone. Okay. But that's one thing you have to learn or needed to know back in the day. If you go someplace and you go with a family member, he tell you not to do something, don't do it. He knows better than you. He called that lady honey or bye baby or something. And they came to his family's house and they killed him and dumped him in the water. So, yeah. So anybody else you can think of that, you know, well, what I was going back to, Emily X supported the kids because, like I said, they stopped the buses, and it was kids, little kids, on the corner in the middle of this chaos, and they had no way to go. X Assembly got in their cars and asked the children, "Please don't be afraid. Where do you live?" And they took the children home. I mean, even though they could have been sued for that, but they felt it was more positive to get those children out of that chaos before somebody truly got hurt. We already had one man die. We don't want anybody else to die. Yeah, and they not only kind of protested Trayvon, well, they protested Trayvon, Eric Gardner, um, Mike Brown, and they tried to make comments to Dr. Wilson, and they wouldn't see him. He wouldn't see him. So they took over his office and they shut down Cold Spring and Helen Road, Argonne and Helen, Argonne and Helen. They shut it down. I mean, nobody could go past. Nobody. No students, no cars coming home from work. They couldn't do anything. They called Dr. Wilson names. He and the gentleman became very good friends because he saw that I don't want to say he saw, but he just knew that this gentleman wasn't afraid to tell him how he felt, tell him what needed to be done, things of that nature. Huh? No, they didn't call him. Well, they did, but I'm not gonna say what they called him. Okay, I'm not gonna say. Um, but they they didn't like. I guess they didn't like the way they were protesting because they were protesting other things, not just Trayvon Martin and stuff like that. They were protesting other things. You know, the money, they were protesting the money we were supposed to get and didn't get until a couple of years later. This gentleman's been graduated and gone through grad school, and we never settled that information about the money until a couple of years ago. Oh boy,
Sad.
it is.
Go.
Let me see what else we got. Okay. So Morgan State was established in the northernmost southern state. One of the founders was a minister by the name of Samuel Green. He was arrested and taken to his home on April 4th, 1867. He was charged with violations of the law under two indictments. Knowing have in his possession of a certain abolition pamphlet. Guess what the pamphlet was? No, it wasn't the Green Book because they weren't driving yet. Something else. Everybody's heard of it. Everybody's heard. Did Disney make a movie out of it? Uncle, Uncle, Uncle Tom, what? Right. He had a book of Uncle Tom's Cabin, and that was violation. He couldn't have it. As a black man, he could not have that book. He could read. They number one, they didn't want you to read. They kept saying you was dumb and you couldn't read. Ah, say a inflammatory counsel, a character that calculated to create discontent among the black population of the state. So they were just trying to make woo. So we're gonna put this black minister in jail, and maybe by the time he comes out, if it's 6 months, 8 months, hopefully his congregation will be gone. Y'all got class? No, if y'all no, I'm good. If y'all ain't got class, I'm good. Okay, and also I tried to put in examination of the founding principles and the lasting vestiges of racism and inclusion that's woven into the fabric, the racial fabric that engulfs Baltimore and the state of Maryland. So if anybody ever tells you you're in the northern state, you're in the northernmost southern state. Maryland is a southern state. Maryland had everything just like the Southerners did. You know, when those people from the 50s, when they came down from New York, talk about what you mean. So a lot of the protests were done later by students on campus, but before it was people that came from out of town that could go eat at the McDonald's or whatever. They didn't have to bring their food out. It's a gentleman that lived on campus, and I talked to him. He's a Methodist preacher as well now. And he said the way they got him, they hazed, like they were in a fraternity. They would come and stick matchbooks between their legs and whatever. And one day he asked, Reverend Douglas Sands asked, "How can I get y'all to stop hazing me?" And they said, "Come protest." And he went and protest. He liked it. When he graduated, he still continued to protest because he was something with Baltimore City that he could do something with the protests and just the negativity that black people would get in the state. You know, how they couldn't do this and how you couldn't do the other. All right. All right. Has anybody noticed the women being in jail? Nobody's noticed the thing out there where women was in jail. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody know why they stayed? Okay, first of all, they put the bail up thinking that if the bail goes up, they'll get them, if they can get them out, they'll get them out and they won't protest anymore. So people whose parents and family could afford them to get out never got out. They just didn't get out. They stayed there and wanted to protest. And lady said they was in a van with a prostitute. And the police officer said, "Oh, don't say those words around those young ladies. They don't know what they mean." So the lady I was interviewed, she said, "No, I didn't know what they mean." She said, "But I know what they mean now." But it was just like they were so young. They were so young. Miss Morgan went to jail. Um, Nobody had the $600, but a couple, that was a lot of money back in the 50s, late 60s, a whole bunch of money. So nobody had it. So I don't know how true it is, but this was before the legal lottery was legal. They said they went to the lottery man, I don't want to say his name, and they went to some of the pharmaceutical dealers, and they gave him the money. If it's true, they gave him the money to get those students out of jail. They admired what the students were doing, even though what they were doing was illegal. But at least they could see people, trying to be an attorney, trying to be this, trying to be a teacher. They wasn't following in his footsteps, like, let me run your numbers for you, let me do this for you. They wasn't doing that. People were going to school and they were going to college. Just like a lot of students, people, kids that come to work as kids hanging on the corner. You need to be in school or waiting for the bus. I couldn't imagine going to work, coming here to work, and leaving my son on the bus stop. Number one, the school is that right down the street, City College. So I would drop him off to make sure he was there. He could catch the bus home. So if he had to leave, if he was going to hook school, he was hooking from City College. He wasn't hooking from home. Yeah. Okay. They've always said this about men and women in the protest era. Who do you think made the most decisions? Who? We would think. We would think. On campus, on college campus, yeah, they would let women, but I'm talking about in regular life, adult people. Thank you. Thank you. What do you think they relegated the women to? What did you say, young man? Busy work, not just busy work, clerical work. They had, they didn't have computers, so everything had to be done by typewriter. They didn't have electrical typewriters where you could go back and no, if you wanted to, you had to use the little tape because my mother taught business education, so I knew all the stuff. That's way before whiteout came out. Then they started using whiteout, but they treated the women, even though the women went to jail. I don't know if you can see this picture. But I'll pass it around. That's unheard of. Pass it around to everybody else. That's unheard of. They had that many women in jail. Right. So anybody else want to see it? Pass it around to them. And I think I got that out of the afro. All right. All right, it's about that time. We got any questions, any concerns? Anything else you want to hear about? Did you get some understanding and information? Okay, so y'all can go out to that exhibition out there in the hallway and you should know what it is or what it's about. Who's this person? Who's that person? Because everybody's labeled. Everybody's labeled. And I think they have a picture of the women in the in jail going down out there. You see them going down, and that was unheard of. Now that might be a little bit more, but in the 50s, no, they didn't have women in jail like that. They was in jail so much they ran out of the little uniforms the women used to wear. They had to wear their own clothes. Yeah. Any other questions, concerns, comments? All right. I work on the 4th floor of the library. If you ever want to see me, need some research or whatever. Anybody taking history? Y'all taking history? What history you taking?
I'm taking 106 right now, but I'm taking 360. I'm taking 105 as well.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So right now, 5 and 6.
History part 5 and part 6.
The history of the United States, part 1 and 2.
Okay, they put some new classes in there. Yeah. Do they have any civil rights history? They have any civil rights history classes that y'all know of?
I don't know if it's like civil rights in particular, but I guess like 106 it covers after Civil War.
Right. Okay. After the civil rights. Right. Okay. I mean, Civil War and probably up to the civil rights. Okay. Well, we're a little over. We started a little late, but it's 12:20. I don't know if you guys have lunch or whatever. But thank you so much, and I'm glad you enjoyed it and you seemed entertained and nobody got up and left or Thank you. Thank you. And once again, the name is Simone Barrett. If you need me in the library, especially you, young man, I would love to talk to you. Hi. Hi, Malaya. Political science? Yeah. Where you get this from? National